All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe evening, maybe even good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. Welcome to our webinar, A Strategic Approach to Student Experience, Why Registrars Should Focus on Degree Progression. Now, before I introduce our speakers today, I wanted to cover a few technical things. If you have a question or need to interact with either presenters or myself, be it related to content or a technical issue, what have you, please use the questions tab on your webinar dashboard. I'll answer technical issues right away, but we will save questions related to content until the end of the main presentation during the Q&A period. Our speakers today are Sabih bin Wazi and John Papenchak. Sabih is the CEO and founder of a degree progression platform named Stellic. Stellic is a growing technology company, but is already trusted as a solution provider by dozens of universities, including the University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, University of Minnesota, and of course, Carnegie Mellon. John Papenchak is the University Registrar at Carnegie Mellon. In this role, he focuses on student privacy, data stewardship and governance, academic policy, academic calendars, and university learning spaces. And I must also say that he is a very active acroin, and we appreciate his involvement here, and of course, Sabih's and Stellic's sponsorship of this webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Sabih.
Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me by the way?
Yep, you're loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yes, so this is basically our first of the many webinar series where we would like to bring in the thought leaders of the industry, especially the registrars community and enrollment community, and get their thoughts on the, on the up and coming trends and issues that they face. Today's topic, as you guys can see, is about like why registrars should focus on degree progression. And I'm super excited to have John Papenchak, registrar at Carnegie Mellon, to kind of help us understand that even better. So we will spend some time understanding what degree progression really is, why is it important, how are those things done in the past, what are the issues with them, and then what did Carnegie Mellon do to resolve them over time. Their new initiatives around degree progression is impacting around 88% of the population, which is pretty exciting. So I want to learn more from John, like how he was able to get there, and some lessons that he learned over over time as he was working on this particular initiative. So pretty exciting. Let me just so thank you, Mike, for doing the introduction for me and John. Just to add a few things, John, you have been at Carnegie Mellon for like 35 years, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. So it's quite a time there. And during that time, you took some really interesting initiatives on campus, including online registration, online grades, things I feel like, I mean, to me, it sounds like, of course, you should have online registration, but I'm assuming like when you were taking those initiatives, those were the new upcoming ideas, working on that. And then I used to sit on multiple councils at the university, including University Education Council. And you are a board member at AAU Registrars and an ACRO member, as Mike mentioned. Just to add a little bit about myself, so I'm a founder and CEO of Stellic. But interesting kind of perspective here that I wanted to bring in is I'm also a recent graduate. I graduated in 2015 as a computer science student. And I was a student, as an international student. There were certain challenges that I faced, which I thought were very unique, which led for us to work on this problem ourselves, especially in the space of degree progression. So let me take like 5 minutes, like giving a very high level view of what I think, or what Stellic as a company think degree progression is. And then we can ask John how he perceives degree progression on his campus. So just to start, when I joined the college, I thought it's a pretty straightforward process. You join the college as a freshman, you spend 4 years there, graduate on time, and then you have your ideal dream job right there. That's my naivety. And then the more we learned about college, the more we realized how complex that system is. So really it's more like this, where as a student, I didn't even know what prerequisites mean. I didn't know what the long-term implication would be if I don't complete certain courses at certain time, right? So as you start like thinking about all of these complexities around 4-year progression, it becomes more and more clear that just like not providing any support or tools to students, it becomes confusing, and only the students who take full charge of their degree progression, only they can graduate on time, only they can get learning the way they should be getting in their 4 years. What I have seen, by the way, like these are some of the questions I've asked myself, and I know my friends really asked ourselves. And even by the way, like as you try to change your majors and then you go from semester to semester, you realize that the questions get more complex as you go further in your journey, right? And then you keep asking yourself, am I done? Am I graduating on time? Am I not graduating on time? And even once those questions are answered, we must not forget that the purpose was not just to graduate on time. The purpose was to prepare the student in order for them to get the job that they actually enjoy and they are prepared and skilled for that job, right? So and so that's kind of a reaction that most students have, where they say like, oh no, I spent 4 years working hard, but now I'm doing this job which I'm not at all prepared for, right? And I'm sharing the perspective as a student, as a recent graduate myself, like all of these different challenges, but these have like very real world consequences even for universities. We'll hear from John, like his perspective on that. But just so you guys know, like 26% students drop out in the very first year, costing like around $13 billion in lost tuition. 40% of students who join a 4-year program do not even graduate in 6 years. And then majority of students who join their first college, they report that they don't have the right skills they need to succeed in their first job. And these are very concerning things looking at higher education, not just from a student's perspective, but also from the institutional perspective. And by the way, as I'm saying these things, I'm not necessarily advocating that there is one tool or one solution that really like conquers all of these things. It's really about a strategy, right? It's not just about let's get a better degree planner, let's get a better scheduler or better degree audit. It's about like how can they all of these pieces work together and empower all the stakeholders, not just students, but all the stakeholders to answer these questions in a more seamless way. Like that's really the key that I think is important about the progression, and that's what at Stellic we are trying to do here. So that's my perspective on degree progression. I want to use most of my time now to learn from John. So John, why don't we start by just like learning a little bit about Carnegie Mellon?
Sure. Thank you, Sabby. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Carnegie Mellon, we're a private select mid-sized institution located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We offer a broad number of academic programs across a number of various disciplines, ranging from the fine arts to STEM disciplines, with lots of interdisciplinary majors, additional majors, minors, graduate programs that are across colleges and schools. So lots of complex types of requirements and things that we're involved in. Obviously we're an institution that continues to reach for the stars. And we were founded by Andrew Carnegie back in 1900 and really take to heart a lot of his principles and guidelines and teachings as we've thought about the institution. I'm not going to go through all the stuff on the slide. Everyone can kind of see that we kind of call this our brag page. So you can find out a little bit more about us by certainly going to cmu.edu. So kind of that's where we sit today. But it's a very exciting time for us as an institution, particularly as we're working with our students in our graduate programs and our undergraduate programs. And our president has stated that this is an extraordinary time for the university. With our world-leading strengths at the intersection of technology and humanity, Carnegie Mellon research, innovation, and creativity, we really believe will help shape the 21st century. So we're really trying to reach beyond what we can do, locally in Pittsburgh, and really embracing kind of global education across our 12 different teaching locations and campuses. So that ties into some of the reasons why degree progression is really, really important to us institutionally. We not only want our students who come here to graduate in 4 years, we would love to see them graduating at 100%, but we know that life happens to students and sometimes they can get a little bit off track. So we spend a lot of time looking at our persistence rates from first to second year, second to third, third to fourth year. It's really about that progressive set of steps that our students go through. And we know that some students are going to take 6 years to graduate. Hopefully not longer, but we realize that sometimes that is the case. We want to work with those students to make sure that they're getting the most out of their Carnegie Mellon experience, as well as taking advantage of all the interdisciplinary opportunities that we have. We know that there are lots of students that come to college, and when you talk to those first year students, they're all excited about, oh, I want to triple major in this and double major in that and take minors and do lots of interesting things. And we want to help them maximize those opportunities, because we also know that the jobs that our students are studying for today, are one thing maybe in the first 3 or 4 years out of school, but eventually the jobs that are going to be the jobs of tomorrow, of the next decades, haven't even been invented yet. And in some of those cases, it's how do we help our students create that learning experience so that they can continue to grow and develop for those new jobs of the future. So I hope that helps with a little bit of our background. And I guess the other major reason that, if you really want to kind of boil it down to the importance of degree progression, dollars matter, right? Our students want to graduate in as few semesters as they can, spending the least amount of money. We're a high cost institution. We want to make sure that students are maximizing those opportunities. And we know that if they graduate on time, they're going to get great jobs and they're going to be able to pay off any student loans that they may have. Those that don't graduate typically have a harder time, and as to be mentioned in that squiggly chart, that students that don't graduate, the one part of that that's not on there is how many of them have higher default rates. And that's something, as a nation, as a world, we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one thing that I was just curious about, and this is like, as we visit campuses, we hear this where people say like student success or degree progression is really an area for, advisors and for the departments to work on. And I'm curious to hear, like, as a registrar, how do you think about, degree progression? Like, what do you think is the role and the responsibility of a registrar, to address this issue?
Well, I think it's integral to our success as an office. One of the goals of our office is to be a resource for all of our academic departments and our students. We tell ourselves every day we help students graduate. So we want that to be part of our mission and our vision and what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so I think degree progression really helps with that, whether it's helping students to register for the right classes, planning the right courses, working with departments to put them in the classroom so we can maximize enrollments, eliminating wait lists. I mean, it's all those things that registrars do on a day-to-day basis that really go hand in hand with our academic units. And it's really a partnership. So while we can provide lots of kind of technical sources or resources and guidance, it's also tied into providing tools to our advisors, to our students, so students can have that self-efficacy to kind of become architects of their process, of their academic career, but also to help them with engaging in with their advisors so that they have meaningful conversations, meaningful engagements to help meet what their academic goals may be, as well as life goals. A lot of times those are conversations that need to happen, and how can we help students with that in exploring careers and courses that may be interesting to them.
Yeah.
Most of us don't go to college and graduate with the same major, right?
Mhm.
Everyone changes their major probably once. I did not. I knew I wanted to be a chemical engineer, but hey, I'm a registrar today. So, go figure.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, this is also surprising for me. I would say, majority of the team members we have at Stellic, they have at least changed their major at least once. And this is, it seems like a very real problem. People do change their interests like throughout those 4 years. Actually, on that note, how do you think about degree progression and student experience? Like, what are the common pitfalls that students have around degree progression, which can then impact their experience in college?
Sure. I think there's a number of them that we're all familiar with. The student that can't get into a key class that they need to kind of make the complex schedule that they had planned work. Everyone comes to a semester with plan A, but
Right.
often going into plan B or plan C or sometimes plan D. So how do we help students with those tools to maximize their schedule, maximize that flexibility in meeting those goals? I think the other part of it is helping them to prepare for courses so that if they're thinking about taking a upper level class down the road, how do we help them with understanding what are prerequisites or co-requisites that might be needed?
Hmm.
Because departments and faculty are getting more and more complex with some of the courses and course requirements that they offer. And so we want to make sure that students are aware of that. So creating that transparency. I
Right.
think the other part of it that's really important, as I've said before, is really it's about helping students walk across that graduation platform. There's
Hmm.
no better feeling for all of us in administration when we worked with some student and helped them with navigating the bureaucracy of the administration or the process of planning their schedule and seeing them graduate. So it's self-fulfilling as well, and I think that's the part of it that makes us all want to come to work every day because we all want to help students.
Hmm. Right, exactly. I mean, that's the hope for Stellic too, like helping students graduate.
Absolutely.
Um, okay, so let's move on to the,
Sure.
the the meat of it, which is like, okay, how were you handling these issues in the past? And just like help me understand those processes that existed in the past and why didn't it work?
So, oh wow, that's a big question for us. So I think that there were a lot of the efforts that were going on. Some people will look at our persistence rates and our graduation rates and say, "Oh, Carnegie Mellon, you're doing better than the national average. Why do you care?" Well, we
Yeah,
care. Again, we all I think we all want to do better. I don't care if your institution's at 90%, you want to get to 92 or 95. If your
right.
institution's at 40%, you want to get to 50%. So I think it's just that continual improvement that we're all committed to with our students. And I think part of what we've done in the past is we have a very decentralized process for advising, for degree requirements. Advisors can be faculty or staff, they can be full-time or part-time. Every unit maybe does it a little bit differently. And one of the things that we've tried to do in our office is provide those resources and those tools no matter who the advisors were. If it was a faculty member who might be advising 2 or 3 students, how do we help them to understanding what are the degree requirements? What are the things that they need to help students with? When are courses typically offered? When aren't they going to be offered?
Mhm.
Because students will make plans thinking that I can take physics 2 any semester I want. Well, then they find out that physics 2 isn't offered in the spring. Um, so I think those inconsistencies sometimes across units, across that decentralized environment, make
Mhm.
it a little bit difficult because sometimes students don't always get the same answer to the questions that they asked. So those were some of the things that we found were difficulties. There
Yeah.
was, creating that common set of expectations and experiences for students so that their advisor, they could have those great dialogues, but yet with the degree requirements that they were always getting consistent answers was one of our goals. In our previous degree audit, it was very limited, very
Mm.
passive. Not everything was clear, not everything was transparent. We had difficulties keeping it up to date. because it was complex. It required a little bit of some esoteric programming language, and not everyone knew how to do that. And so we had departments who would kind of roll over their requirements every year and say, okay, it's 90% right, but here are the 10% of things that are exceptions or waivers or special cases, right? As we all have on our campuses. And that's difficult for students and advisors. If they didn't know about these special cases, how did they know whether there was an exception that needed to be made, or if the student wasn't meeting the prerequisite or meeting requirements? And so advisors were in a passive position. Students were being kind of held in a passive position, and we want our students to be engaged. I mean, we have a phrase on campus: we want students to be architects of their own change, and we want them to be empowered, and we want our advisors to be empowered. So that was a lot of the kind of the case for change, and saying we needed to change how we were doing things.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly what I was looking for. Like, how different stakeholders get affected. It's not just the registrar's office, it's the advisors, the departments, and really, like, arguably most importantly, the students. As a former Carnegie Mellon student myself, I actually have a lot to say about that. I mean, in fact, like when we joined, if I remember correctly, we were still relying a lot on the PDFs to understand, like, when things are offered and all that stuff. And it wasn't a fun experience going through all the classes and trying to match the description.
Not a little bit fun.
So yeah, I mean, it was a challenge. And in fact, like in this deck, I have a screenshot of, like, how our degree requirement thing looked like. This is, I like how you use the word like passive purely. I mean, this is really a report. Like, what do I do with this? So I have to like bug my advisors to make me understand, okay, so what does it mean by, like, I have one requirement remaining, and how can I really satisfy that particular requirement while still aligning my interest and my career goals, right? Like, that conversation becomes very passive if if we are not providing the right tools around that.
Exactly.
So, okay. So, and I believe, like, you had these tools and these technologies for many years, right? So what really changed that that made you or like stakeholders at Carnegie Mellon decide, it's time, we have to invest in this?
So I think a lot of it started when we began to look at our student system. We're a homegrown system, using an older degree audit application that was really from the 80s, that had kind of grown up synergistically on campus, really with a lot of our undergraduate majors only. Minors and additional majors were kind of a second thought. Graduate programs weren't even really a thought. And as we were migrating and updating some of our student system, the campus got, kind of, energized about how we were doing things and what we were doing. And they started to really make the case that we needed a degree platform that would help students to be actively engaged in the process and match what we were doing on the student system and on our student portal side. And students said the same thing. They said, look, I can see all of my information. I can order a degree verification. I can have some services that I do on my own. Why can't I do the same thing on the degree platform? So there was definitely a grassroots effort as we were looking at things, but there was also the fact that we knew that we needed to do better. Go ahead. No, that's all right.
No, I was just asking, like, who were the really like a stakeholder in that? Is it the registrar's office initiative, or like who really took charge of this process?
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon your point of view, our office really kind of owned the degree audit and supported it. And as we were working with a lot of our users, we basically said, look, we have to do something here. We began the process about maybe 4.5 years ago, where we started looking at different applications that were out there. And we assembled what we called our A team, which were a number of assistant deans and key advisors that were very knowledgeable about the processes and knew how they were broken and what we needed to do to improve. And together as a team, we basically started to build a coalition. We gathered senior level support. We basically did a number of demos, expanded it to other advisors, collected lots of feedback. So really, we did a lot of investigation. And as we investigated different options, then we started to do kind of our needs requirements, doing kind of the gap analysis of the applications that were out there. What couldn't our current application do that they did? And vis-a-vis what were things that we needed for Carnegie Mellon, because after all, aren't all of our institutions special? And our advisors think they're very special. So they had certain requirements that they wanted to make sure that we met. And so as we investigated all of these different applications, really looking at the flexibility a decentralized tool could provide to us, it helped us with thinking about how are we going to replace all of these shadow systems, all of the check sheets, Excel files that people were using across campus, while still being able to engage in a tool that was, kind of hands-on for the students, hands-on for the advisors, as well as easy to maintain and keep up to date. So those were the things that were really driving the process. And we focused primarily at the undergraduate level. However, we knew deep down in our hearts, we wanted to do something for graduate programs.
Right.
We knew that with the growth of master's programs, and our campus is not unique to that, we needed to have tools for those master's students to be able to answer the same questions on the transparency of what do they need to take for their degree, what are electives that they can take, how can they take advantage of the interdisciplinary opportunities. And so really that grassroots effort started kind of with the registrar's office, with our advisors, and then we just, engaged everyone that we could talk with on campus, really getting it involved with a lot of the deans until we felt like we had the groundswell support and then obtained the appropriate funding to change the application.
Yeah. And so we have been talking quite a bit about technology and platforms and tools that needs to support that. But I mean, to what extent is technology important? I mean, what I've been hearing from some of the other universities is it's just not, technology is just one part of the equation. You still have to energize the audience, the users and the stakeholders, to understand why there is a need for for changes in this space. So help me understand that a little bit. What's the role of technology in this whole approach towards better degree progression?
Well, I think technology is something that has enabled a lot of advisors to kind of knock down some barriers, and it's also allowed them to eliminate a number of what I would refer to kind of as the mechanics of advising, right? You need to take these classes for this degree, these types of things. Technology is great for, simplifying some of those types of things, but I think it still has to go hand in hand with really advising is the key part of the whole degree progression. As students are talking with their advisors, having those meaningful dialogues about what are my goals? What are the things I'd like to get out of my academic career? What are the things I'd like to do professionally after graduation? What are my interests? What are courses that can kind of tie into that? Technology can give the advisors the tool for that, but it comes down to kind of that person-to-person dialogue, that student to advisor, advisor to advisor conversations, so that advisors can also talk with one another about different opportunities that they have available for their students. So I think technology is part of the package, but it's not the whole thing. We've also spent a lot of time talking with our advisors about what were the things they wanted in the technology, what were the support tools that they needed in order to help advise their students, so that, again, we can get them out of a lot of the mechanics of that work.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you this question, and I'm sure it will be valuable for the people who are listening to us. When you are taking an approach like this and trying to change the process on campus, especially because so many different stakeholders are involved, not everyone will be excited, right? They'll have their own thoughts. They'll have like how do you balance that? Like when some advisors are saying, you know what, I don't want to learn any more things. That's it. I have my processes, they're working, and I just want to leave me alone kind of situation.
That's a great question. So we continue to struggle with that. Not so much as much anymore, but definitely when we brought it out, we had lots of folks that were, well, the old system's not that bad. Even though they were some of the biggest proponents of changing it, they were very comfortable with it. They knew how it worked. They knew what they needed to do. So, in some ways, I was kind of the mean old guy that said, we're shutting it off, in 6 months. We're shutting it off in 9 months. And I would go around campus telling people, it's going away. It's going to be shut off. We have to move. It's kind of like the burning building. You better get out and move to the safe space. So that was one of the things that helped us with getting a lot of our advisors to realize that, okay, we were serious about this. We weren't going to run in parallel forever. We were going to make them have to move, but we spent a lot of time providing resources and training and engaging and asking them lots and lots of questions about how this was going to help them.
Right.
So it wasn't, oh, we're just going to shut it off and you have to go there. It was, here's why it's a better mousetrap. Here's how you're going to help your students, how you're going to help them to be able to look at their progression from first to second year, second to third year to fourth year, as well as those students who maybe are in their third or fourth year, they're struggling, how you can do some what ifing against other majors, other degrees to help those students with maybe they need to, change their path a little bit as we started off this discussion, right? That squiggly path. Not everybody stays in the same major. So how can we help advisors with the tools of that? And I think those were a lot of the reasons that we helped share with folks, and they saw the case for change. They saw the benefits there, and we're excited about it. Particularly the what ifing was something, again, they couldn't do it before except for looking in the catalog and trying to map student requirements to this. They can do it very easily now. It helps them with planning that opportunity for students. And we found that, it allows students to do that what ifing, especially when they were struggling. So now it put the power kind of in the students' hands, again, driving them to be architects of their own career.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, let me share something. So we were talking about how this report is so passive. And so one thing that we tried to do from advisors' perspective is we brought in the student piece up front. This is just a an interface where it's okay, I'm gonna answer questions that advisors are getting again and again, which are mechanical. So then you are leaving the time of advising session to have a more meaningful conversation. Let me actually ask you this question instead of me answering that. How is it going, John? Once we are live.
It's going great. We have, over 15,000 students that are in the application, over 1,100 degree programs, almost 7,000 courses, because we loaded all of our courses from all the history, over 225 degree templates, and 1,000 academic advisors. Right now, our students are probably about 88% at the undergraduate adopting what the use is and planning their schedules. Our advisors are at 65% are actively engaged in using the application. We're still spending a lot of time on our graduate programs right now because that's been something that's new to the campus, but it's very exciting. We have graduate departments that are now knocking on our door, asking to kind of get involved and get started with it because they see the benefit for their students, and their students are hearing it from other colleagues and looking at it and go, wait a minute, why isn't my degree program in here? So we're trying to keep up. And so we hired an extra person on a contract basis in order to help with managing those processes. And advisors continue to give us lots and lots of feedback about what's working really well, what are things that we want to fix. And, I will admit, we found some warts in our processes, in our policies, and that's been a great process because it's allowed us to be introspective and think about the transparency of some of these processes, as well as the consistency and conformity of these processes. One, as you and I have talked in the past, double counting of units for a student that might be doing a major and an additional major. What are the double counting rules, and trying to define all of those and make sure that we're clear and consistent. So we're excited about it. The students are excited about it. Our advisors are excited. And now we're starting to get into the point where students are planning their degrees for 4 years. They're giving us good information. we're excited now to be able to start to share that with our departments. So now they can look at what are the courses that students are expecting to take. Can we now use that as a way of doing some demand-based scheduling and allowing departments to plan a little bit better for additional course demand, whether it's opening extra sections, finding a bigger classroom? What are all those things that can help our departments with meeting that supply and demand?
Yeah, and is this like, is this whole initiative like voluntary from student side, or are you like are you requiring students to use the platform?
We're not requiring students. So if they wanted to kind of do their own paper check sheet, they could. But we're finding that most of our students are in here and using it, because when they go to see their advisor, the first thing the advisor does is bring up the application so that they can see, okay, how are you making progress towards your degree? What are the things that you're doing? And they reinforce to the students what they're able to do. We're also finding that advisors can send notes to students, and they're using that actively to engage students in their plans. Students can create plans and send it to their advisor and get feedback, kind of through a chat function, so that it's not necessarily trapped in email, but it's in the application, and advisors can go back to that and refer to it, to use it as a great advising tool, and to help them not have to remember everything because it's in the application. That helps them with those memory joggers. And then they can also share notes with the students about, I think your plan is great in this case, but look, you're going to be taking 2 courses that are pretty heavy. You may want to think about, shifting 1 or 2 of those around in your 4-year plan.
Yeah. By the way, yesterday night, as I was preparing for this slide deck, I just looked at some numbers, and like, here are the numbers that were coming from Carnegie Mellon. So like we have like around 88% adoption across undergraduate population. And like, more than 1 million times people have searched for different course recommendations, and you can see how it's impacting their plan. And what's interesting, and that's why I was asking this question, is this is a voluntary tool. It's very, I think really kudos to the processes at Carnegie Mellon, where a tool that's not required by the students to use it, they are still interested and excited to use it. That shows like, how we have energized the stakeholders, to be encouraging students to use something like this. Okay, so what's next then? So how do you think about this as what's the future of degree progression?
So there are a number of different initiatives that we're trying to work on. One of them, as I've kind of mentioned, that 1st to 2nd year progression, 2nd to 3rd year, 3rd to 4th year. We're really excited about looking at our students kind of in those populations and saying, okay, are they making progress? Our 1st year students, did they pass? Are they 25%? Just to give a rough number. If they're not, who and where are they struggling? Same thing for our 2nd to 3rd year students. We do a really, really good job of getting our 1st year students into their 2nd year. 2nd year gets a little bit harder here because they get into their major courses. That's when, plan B starts to kick in some cases. We want to do a better job of anticipating some of that with some of the key courses, looking at that progress, and then being able to help suggest to students, a plan B or a plan C if they need it, or thinking about, well, okay, maybe you don't want to be an engineer and you've changed your mind. How do you become a registrar, and what are the courses you should take, right? Those types of things. And then the other part of it is really in our 3rd and 4th year, really looking at the students who, again, may be getting off track, or who are thinking about very interdisciplinary programs, such as some of our self-defined or student-defined majors that we have. How do we help engage those students in that planning and that progress, so that we know earlier on what their plans are, how they plan to achieve that student-defined major, and getting those things through their appropriate approval path, so it's not their 4th year and all of a sudden they say, oh, I want to do a student-defined major, and everyone's scrambling to try to make everything fit within a particular semester. The other part of it is helping students with, who have gotten off track. They've taken a leave of absence, or they've had to skip a class or 2 here or there, kind of getting back onto track, so that they can meet their degree requirements. because unfortunately, as a medium-sized school, we don't offer every class every semester. So how can we help students with seeing how can they kind of realign their schedule to get back on track to either graduate in 4.5 years, and those types of things. And
Yeah.
so we know those are going to be works in progress, but we're really excited about our students adopting the platform and taking advantage of that. And then as we do that, we're hoping to then be able to feed that back to our advisors so that advisors can get a better sense of what are the exceptions, what are the waivers, what are the kind of degree paths that students are following. Maybe some of those exceptions and waivers and non-traditional paths should be part of the traditional path. Can we look at that as influencing our curricula in order to, better serve our students so that they don't become exceptions, they become the status quo.
Right.
So those
Right.
are very exciting times.
Yeah, no, I think this is, you and I have been talking about it for a while, and you kind of alluded to that in the previous question too. Like, we are generating all of this interesting, valuable data on the platform,
Mhm.
looking at the plans of students, looking at the progression and the progress of the students. Like, it really, like, it's super exciting to think about like how all of this data can be fed back into some decision making. Have you thought about some of those, like, insights that could be helpful in decision making? All the data that we have on, on a platform like Stellic?
Oh, absolutely. We know, the really hot courses that come up every semester. Um, but sometimes courses surprise us. This would
Mm.
be a great tool for us to be able to anticipate what are some of those, hot new courses, right? Artificial intelligence is super red hot right now.
Mhm.
Are there courses in AI that all of a sudden everyone is thinking about taking? We could know that before the registration period and perhaps make some adjustments to our schedule in order to, again, as I said, maybe put it in a bigger room, add an additional section, go to the provost and say, or the dean, and see if there's some flexibility. Those are the types of things that can help our students in the long run, help the departments. And if we can keep students off of wait lists, I mean, this is one area that we're really excited about because we're trying to think about how can we prevent students from being waitlisted in the first place so that they don't have to replan or realign their schedule or go back to their
Right.
advisor and figure out what are they going to do. And
Yeah.
we've all heard the stories where little Susie gets on 4 wait lists and then they're calling their parents, and then the parents calling usually the registrar's office or the advisor and saying, why is Susie on 4 wait lists? So we
Yeah.
want to minimize that because again, that's a lose-lose situation. We're looking for win-win-win where we want students to get the courses that they need to graduate, get them in time, help with the advising process eventually to graduate on time.
Yeah, no, I mean, as a student, I can tell you, like, when you are super looking forward to a particular course and that course is filled, like, there is no feeling like that. Like, you just so
Right.
want to take that course. So yeah, it's very frustrating from a student's perspective. Not that I'm gonna call my parents about it, but I would be frustrated, about that. Okay, this has been super helpful, John.
Sure.
We have like more than around like 100 attendees on this call. Like, are there any, like, as you went through this whole journey from, like, improving the degree progression atmosphere on campus, are there any any advice, any lessons that you want to share with the audience?
Sure. I just have a couple, quick thoughts. I think, as registrars, I mean, degree progression is something that's, endemic to our success, to our institution's success. We can be leaders in this space. We should, those types of leaders, we should be embracing new technological solutions that help distribute the ownership of the process to our students, to our advisors, to our departments. All of the degree planning and requirements. It's the responsibility of all of us on our campus to help our students in that space. And I think as registrars, we can be leaders on our campuses in that area. Second, I think this is a great area that, we want to empower our students as academics of their academic career. We want to
Right.
help them with that. And this is another way that providing these technological kind of self-service solutions can help students with navigating the process, but still having those meaningful conversations with their advisors.
No,
And
I
then
love.
lastly, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, John.
No, I was just going to say, I just want to thank you and your team for, the introduction to your plan back in 2015, and it's been a great journey.
Awesome. No, I love it. I mean, ending it on the note of like student empowerment is really the right way of thinking about it. That's great. Just couple of other thoughts before we take in questions
Sure.
from the audience. So as I said, this is really a webinar series, like learning from different thought leaders in the space. Our next webinar would be about like outcome-based degree progression. So not just like ticking off the boxes, but thinking about the outcomes of the requirements that we will be satisfying. So we'll have Tom Black, who is Associate Vice Provost and Registrar at Johns Hopkins, and hear his thoughts about that. And also a lot of things that we discussed about today is also part of our white paper that we have compiled. So you can go to bit.ly/degree progression to learn about that. So thank you so much, John. I would like, let's open it up for questions and see what people have to say. Mike, do you have questions for us?
We do, and thanks again for both of you presenting and sharing your expertise there. So our first question is, I guess I'll direct it to John at first, but then maybe Sabi, you can come in afterwards with some context from other universities. But the question is, how many students have degree plans, and what are some of the most successful ways in your experience to move advisors in that direction?
Right now, as Sabi said, we have 88% of our students who are participating in that. For our undergraduates, that's a little bit over 5,600 students that have some degree plan in place. It may not be all 4 years, but again, they all have it in a variety of components. And over 90 of our graduate programs have audits in place as well. We're trying to move that needle as quickly as we can. Some of the efforts are, I have 2 staff members, Jamie Brandon and Brittany Jones. I have to give a shout out to both of them. They bust their butts to get out to the departments and do lots of one-on-one coaching, counseling, hand-holding, whatever you'd like to call it. It really does help to be in the departmental space, to get those advisors engaged and active in the process. And we found that that's the best way to do it, is press the flesh, right? You got to get out there like a politician. You got to get out there and sell the product. The product happens to be the application. And our staff are really good at that, and they're really focused on that. I'm very lucky to have 2 staff that can have that ability and are really good at doing it. And no one can hire them.
Yeah, and then Sabi, I was just wondering, based on kind of general information from some of your other institutional clients, what's been the adoption rate over, generally speaking?
Yeah, generally speaking, our average adoption rate across different universities is above 80%. That has been true regardless of the type of institution. And just to add to what John was saying, it's also to do, I think there's an onus on the platform interface to make it something where students engage and enjoy the process, right? So if you give them something and say, build a plan, and you give them an interface that doesn't look like Instagram, doesn't look like, Facebook, you will have a very hard time in students really building out the 4 years. So we have been thinking quite a lot about how do you make that, how do you gamify the process, right? So I think that has been primarily the reason why we have achieved some, I think some decent adoption across different universities.
Very nice. Yeah, so sort of speaking to the future of degree progression, ACRO has been very involved in developing the comprehensive learner record, which is I don't want to say disruptive necessarily, but sort of additive to the normal transcript. It's using competency-based education and prior learning assessment, so on and so forth. I guess a question for both of you from an institutional perspective and as a vendor, how do you see a wider adoption of the CLR kind of impacting how degree progression works and how it's consumed?
Sure. I think it's a great question, and obviously something that we're all very interested in, because our students are asking for these additional tools, these additional ways to tell their story. And I think the degree progression ties nicely into that. When we have students who are taking courses that may not necessarily just fit kind of the standard degree plan, this allows them to tie that information into a comprehensive learner record, hopefully with program and course outcomes to be able to tell their story and what makes them unique. And it's something that we're definitely experimenting with. We're in a few different trials and trying to work on some different things with course outcomes and program outcomes, as well as looking at different ways to structure our transcript. We're excited about looking at a way to take some of those degree requirements and fit them back into our transcript, so course groupings can kind of make sense as it relates to what and how the degree was earned, not necessarily just how the courses were chronologically completed. So, Sabi, I'll let you add to that.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, I think like the more we start looking at transcript beyond the course, the more holistic the experience becomes. And that's where we are thinking, like, we are trying to create an interface where people are thinking about what outcomes am I preparing for over my 4 years? How diversified is my skill set as I prepare for those things? I mean, we have worked a lot on the course recommendation engine, which is basically saying you should not be thinking about like satisfying your humanities elective by any course. You should be thinking about like finding the intersection of the outcomes you want to get from those courses and the courses that can satisfy that elective requirement, right? So yeah, I mean, I think this is extremely important to think about like CLR and think about programs and course outcomes. I know we presented at ACRO I think it was the last annual ACRO, where we talked about how the course catalog and the degree planning and audit and the transcript system all needs to work together to provide a more of a CLR based transcript, not just a linear list of course codes. One thing I would say, by the way, is, and this is where we will dive a lot deeper next time when we talk. Tom Black, as you guys may know, like is one of the thought leaders when it comes to CLRs and outcome-based learning. So hopefully in our next webinar, we will dive deeper into that particular question too.
Yeah, thanks for your insight.
Great plug for the next webinar.
yeah, that's right. Great follow-up. So our second one, does the degree progression system have any direct integration with the homegrown enrollment system to provide students who have developed a plan a streamlined path to course enrollment?
Yeah, John, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So yes, it does. So basically, we're making sure that our data is up to date with course offerings, so that students can basically create their plan, so they know exactly what we're going to be offering in the upcoming semester. If a course time or location or day has changed, we're integrating that with the application, so that again students can make those adjustments. It sends them warning notices if they try to take two classes that are overlapping or have time conflicts, so that again they can make the appropriate adjustments accordingly. We haven't quite worked on the shopping cart yet, but that's one of our plans, is that from their plan we'll be able to integrate that back into our student portal and let the students register from that portal.
Yeah. I mean, right now, half of the universities we have partnered with is working on this plan. Exactly what John was saying, is having like a one-stop shop for the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out your requirements, figuring out your 4-year plan that satisfies the requirements, figuring out the sections that you will take for those courses, and then registering for those courses right from the same interface. And I think really the one key point that we didn't talk too much about in today's webinar is about how important integration is, right? If you have like these 4 or 5 different sources of truths and they all like don't really talk to each other, it's really annoying from students' perspective, and it can have like serious effects of that. So it's very important for all of these systems to talk to each other and provide an experience where everything can be really done in one platform. And that's something as Stellic we truly believe in.
Awesome. Thanks for your answers. One more we have. What role does degree progression play at smaller schools, smaller institutions? And I guess
Oh,
I
great
don't know
question.
if it's more of a question for Sabi or John. Is I guess your Carnegie Mellon's more, as you pointed out, kind of a medium to large sized institution.
Mhm.
So
So I think a lot of it depends upon your culture. If everyone, is graduating at 100%, then maybe you don't have to worry about it. But if not everyone's graduating at 100% in 4 years, then I think it's something that applies to any school, because again, until we're all at 100%, higher ed is going to kind of take that knock of why aren't students graduating on time. And so I don't think the size of the school matters. It really kind of ties into your institutional culture.
Mhm.
Maybe, if there's a process where everyone can be kind of, handheld through the steps, maybe you don't need the technology to do it because you've got a process that works. But if
Yeah.
there are gaps in that process, then this is where I think the technology can help any school with trying to figure out where can we get better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have schools that have partnered with us who have like 60,000 students, and we also have school who only have like 200 students. So as John mentioned, like, like the smaller you go in terms of like, number of students on campus, the less resources typically you have to do some of these things, right? So I think it is very important to make sure that in a school with only 200 students, and maybe one or two like advisors, are you able to provide the same experience that they will get at an institution like Carnegie Mellon? And for that to happen, like a lot of the conversation needs to be more efficient and more streamlined. So yeah, I mean, to John's point, it really is about the culture and the priorities of the institution more than anything else.
thanks again. And I think we'll have time for one more before we have to wrap up here. Does your degree progression strategy require getting information from departments early so that students can plan ahead? And if so, how do you make that happen?
So ours does not require any earlier any earlier information. We typically publish our schedule of classes about 3 weeks before registration, and then we're collecting information from the academic departments, typically about 4 or 5 weeks before that. That has been our timeline all along, and really those 4 or 5 weeks, most of it has been on trying to do all of the room scheduling, but we didn't have to extend the process or lengthen it for what was going on in order for advising. We also, as part of that, within the application, provide historical course offering. So for right now, we're not going to release our spring schedule till the end of October, but students can go into the application and, based upon what was offered last spring or the previous spring, can see courses that typically are expected to be offered in the spring. So they can
Yeah.
kind of start doing some of their early course planning, and then when we release the schedule of classes in at the end of the month, then they can make those fine-tune adjustments. They have then 3 weeks to kind of meet with their advisors before they have to basically go through the registration process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to add to that, like I think there is also a lot of like cool technology things that we can do on our end to make that make the process much more seamless. This is the number one question that have been asked every time we go for an on-site demo, where people say like, hey, do we have to really prepare 2 years in advance for planning to be efficient? And the answer is not really. To John's point, you look at the last 3 or 4 years of offerings, and based on that, you have a pretty good idea if a course is typically offered in spring, is it offered every alternate fall, every
Mm-hmm.
2 years, or it's really like intermittently offered. And that that gives a very strong grounds in having some plan, and you have to be reactive. I mean, there's another piece, right? No matter how solid your plan is, there's always a chance where one course that you thought will be offered was not offered because the faculty member was not available, or so many different reasons. And then you have to kind of like engage with the student at that point and say that, hey, you were planning to take marketing 305, it's not offered, but here are the other courses you can still take to be on track, right? So you have to be like, make sure that we understand the past to give them some kind of accurate prediction, but also understand that we have to be reactive as these things are not set in stone.
Yeah, no, great answers, great insight. Yeah, so with that, we've reached the end time, so to speak, of the webinar. So I do want to thank you, John, for sharing your experience implementing this at your school, and I want to thank Sabi and Stellic for their willingness to kind of share their platform with us and what they are thinking about the future of degree progression. So if you two have any wrap-up comments, feel free to give them now.
No,
Just if anyone has any questions, I'm available anytime. You can, drop me an email. I'm happy to chat about it, or either over email or phone, or at one of the different ACRO meetings. So, happy to be available. So, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you got something, useful out of it.
Mhm. No, and I just want to thank you, John, for taking the time out and sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thanks again. Look forward to a post-webinar survey from us in about 1 hour. And that'll include a little survey along with the link for this handout and the recording. And yeah, definitely follow up with Stellic if you want some more information about their white paper or about their platform. So thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys.
Enjoy your day. Bye.